A training camp started in Flowery Branch today. So now is where, as Calais Campbell said, you really get down to it and you really get to see what each and every person is all about. Now, we know he, of course, is on the non-designation PUP list, but Arthur Smith said, as you tweeted out, Jarvis, that everything's going to be fine. There are no long-term issues or implications, but he was indeed present there for his 16th training camp. But we know we've got some guys that are in their first training camp, second training camp that we really have our eyes on because we want to see what it is that they're going to be able to show us in training camp ahead of the regular season. Now, of course, Jarvis and I will be out there throughout training camp in Flowery Branch. We'll bring you guys all of our reaction, all of our thoughts on what we see. But first things first, let's talk about what you saw and what you heard today. Interesting conversation, as always. Arthur Smith is always going to give us a nugget to think about because he's a cerebral guy. And one of the things that he told you when you asked him a couple questions, but one of the takeaways that you had was his comment that basically said, I don't mind bucking the system. And when we talk about the system, yes, on defense, we know that Ryan Nielsen is probably going to throw some wrinkles in there that the Falcons haven't seen, maybe the league hasn't even seen as well. But really, that comment to me speaks more about what Arthur Smith wants to do on offense, because unconventionally, the team as a whole drafted position players. You literally drafted skill players, rather, in Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And that's not something that you see done draft after draft. And then you went and drafted Bijan Robinson, definitely bucking the system. We know all the conversation and commentary about the position of running back these days. And Arthur Smith is unapologetic about the offense running, no pun intended, through the ground game. So what were your thoughts? You felt like there was a sneaky little undertone there that Arthur Smith was trying to convey when he talked about, really, I don't give a flying flip about what everybody else is doing.
You know what? To be honest with you, I like that. Yes. I like people who march to the own beat of their drum, right? Or whatever. So however they're saying is like, because I feel like that's kind of how I am, you know what I'm saying? Because I may be a little bit biased to that. But, when you think about, being able to run the football as successfully as they did last year, and once they did throw the football, they kind of got exposed, right? And you kind of understand why Arthur Smith had to go with that system last year, and you hope and pray that Desmond Ridder can be an upgrade to that, right? And not going to take much to be able to do that too. So I think he's just basically leaning into what he already does, because leading up to that, that answer, I asked him about Michael Pruitt, and you know what? Michael Pruitt had 4 touchdowns last year. He was a guy that's well liked in the locker room, a guy that you can count on in the red zone, obviously. And when you think about having him, you have Jonnu Smith, you got Kyle Pitts, you got Parker Hesse, you got Keith Smith, who you can throw in there as well. So I was just kind of kicking it around like, hey, coach, what about that 14 personnel? He was just like, man, it may be 05, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't mind bucking conventional wisdom. And I think that's the whole mantra of the team, right? Like you mentioned, with a draft, 3 consecutive years on drafting pass catchers. I know Bijan Robinson is the running back, but he's going to be used in the passing game a lot, folks. You better get used to it because, hey, Tyler Algier was out there taking snaps with the ones. Like, he's still there. He ain't going nowhere. I really feel like he's not going anywhere. And I think it's going to be Arthur Smith is going to get very creative when it comes to his formations. Then we already know I will continue to scream at the top of my lungs. Formations dictate what the defense is going to give you, or they can dictate coverages. And when you dictate coverages pre-snap, that makes it easier for the quarterback. And what makes it easier for a quarterback, it kind of works because you have a 3rd-round draft pick that nobody believes in outside of that building up in Flowery Branch. So I think that for Arthur Smith to kind of essentially confirm what I already thought anyway, for him to say it out loud, I just thought that was really cool to understand, like, okay, here's the culture. Here's what it is. Here's what we are. We are the Falcons. We don't care what you do. Here's what we do. And then you are the ones that are going to have to make the necessary adjustment.
Yeah, and Chris Lindstrom talked about that as well, just being excited to have a guy like Desmond Ridder who they, like you said, they believe in what he can do in that building. And this is an opportunity also for Arthur Smith because he has the good fortune of having Desmond Ridder for an entire season under QB1. There's no competition this season. He's the guy. So that allows you to then say, okay, to your point, I have Tyler Algier, so that's sort of the established run game, if you will. I have Cordero Patterson, that's the established run game. And then I can easily add Bijan Robinson in, and that's the established run game. So let me go over here and kind of work my magic and see how we can evolve the passing game. And then I'm going to let that run game dictate what that passing game is able to do. So you're still going to see the unconventional wisdom that's going to be dictating, because this is going to be an offense that in all likelihood the run sets up the pass. Now, on that offensive side of the ball as well, speaking of the run setting up the pass, if the Falcons are anywhere close to how successful they were on the ground last year, this team will be just fine, especially thanks to a stellar performance by the entire offensive line. Where the offensive line kind of had challenges, especially on that right side at tackle, but where they really had some issues and some challenges was in pass protection. So now we're switching gears to the left side, because the other piece there was on the left side, it was like a virtual shuffling, if you will. It was literally like Simon says, who's going to be
spin the wheel of random white dudes playing left guard.
Who's gonna play left guard this week? And literally, although you and I really believed in Elijah Wilkinson, part of it was injury. He was injury prone, and that didn't really work out as well. Now you got a guy. You got a guy in Matthew Bergeron, and you got a guy behind him that could even play some of those snaps. And you'll talk about that in a quick second. Matt Hennessy. But you said you'd have your eye on Bergeron in particular. What did you see? I know it's early, but what did you see out of him today at camp?
To be honest, a guy's trying to learn. That's the first thing to come to mind, because, like, here's the thing. Like, and it goes back to what I talked about, a couple of days ago, a couple of times on the show. Guys, check out the show. I'm telling you, you will miss something if you don't catch up on ATL day ones. But the thing that about Arthur Smith is, he doesn't mind making just go back, we're talking about unconventional, right? Like, okay, you trade up for a guy in the second round. Most of the time, those guys, hey, you're going to automatically put them in as a starter. Nope, that's not what Arthur Smith is going to do. So I think that, they had Matt Hennessy working with the ones today. So, because Bergeron is going to be a learning curve. This dude is moving from left tackle to left guard. I know some of the footwork is similar, but it's a different ball game once you slide a couple inches over it or slide down a gap into that guard spot. It is a totally different type of fight. They say styles make fight, right? Those are some of the things that you got to switch some things up. You have to learn and really grasp that concept, because, hey, having a 2 to 3 yard gap when that ball is snapped at left tackle is different from a half a yard to a yard. That's a big difference in the NFL, because these guys are moving these days. So I think that, to see Matt Hennessy working with the ones and see Matthew Bergeron with the second team kind of, hey, learning, just out there learning. And I think that it's going to ramp up just a little bit more once they put the pads on. So, that was one of the things that kind of just stood out to me.
Indeed. And then we also talked a little bit, because that obviously is the rookie whom we have our eye on, but we talked about this class of 2022 and needing to see an uptick from several of them as well. But in particular, we talked about needing to see an uptick in the performance and play of Arnold Ebiketie, especially because ATL Day Ones has always told you, our mantra is that defense matters and pass rush matters. And if it's really going to matter, yes, you can look at some of the acquisitions in the offseason, like Calais Campbell, whom we all talk about. But the bottom line is some of these younger guys have to step up, and AK is probably at the top of that list. What you see out of AK today that told you, okay, I think I can see just some shades and some flashes of him trying to become the edge rusher that we thought he could be?
I see Ryan Nielsen doing everything he possibly can to put this guy in position to succeed. Because when you think about him moving around, maybe you might even see him dropping into a coverage from now and then. And I think that, one of the things that kind of is in my soul right now, I really feel like Nielsen is going to send a lot more pressure than what we saw from DPs last year. Because, hey, we understand why DPs didn't send that much pressure last year, especially when you look at the guys on the back end of the defense. So, and we'll talk tomorrow about my conversation with Jesse Bates, because oh no, might just be sold just a little bit, T. But
Okay.
we'll reserve that conversation to tomorrow. But
Yes.
I think when we talk about Arnold Ebiketie and what Ryan Nielsen is trying to do, I see what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And like I said, he's trying to put him in position to say, hey, when it's 3rd and long, you're going to be on the field. So I need you to do something. And I think that with Bud Dupree still out there and Lorenzo Carter still out there, it's going to be a sight to see. I think this is going to be very exciting year for this defense. Either way, however it goes, I think going into it is going to be exciting. But I think either way, this is going to be something that is going to be a storyline throughout the entire season for sure.
Yeah, I do think so, because both of the positions that we're talking about, if we look at left guard, even if we look at, and I'll just say pass rush, we'll just keep it generic like that.
Yeah,
There's
definitely
not a lot of competition per se. You kind of know where various players are going to kind of fall on the depth chart, for lack of a better term. However, and I say that meaning with the starting position, right? But I do think there's something to be said about the possibility of varying the percentage of snaps that the 1 and the 2 might take, right? And that's on both sides, with both mats, if you will. And really, I'm going to say just about anybody in that darn pass rush core. So I do think that there's absolutely an intrigue there. Not so much that there's intrigue because there are these position battles, but more so, what are you showing to your offense coordinator, your DC, and even your head coach that say, okay, I'll probably split these snaps a little bit more evenly, if you will, or I can see where that guy's showing me something that in particular packages, he is our guy. So like Jarvis said, more coming from Flowery Branch throughout the course of training camp, from Jarvis, from me. We can't wait to share that with you guys. And yeah, we'll do some more deep dives tomorrow into his conversation with Jesse Bates and talking a little bit about the secondary. But in the meantime, if you guys happen to have some thoughts, you got any questions for us that you want us to ask, kind of put it in our mailbag, which is our chat on YouTube. And we might just take those questions to Flowery Branch and then bring them back on the ATL Day 1 show. So don't forget, everydayers, drop by, drop some comments in the chat on YouTube. And of course, drop this down where you download all of your podcasts.